Like other women, empresses were expected to be seen and not heard, and when an empress was noticed at all, it was often as a target for criticism. This is particularly true of Justina, because much of what we know about her comes from writers who took the side of Bishop Ambrose during the conflict that emerged between the two of them. One of these writers was Augustine, and we will see in a later chapter that his mother Monica played a small part in the conflict herself. Ambrose would become one of the heroes of medieval Latin Christendom, and it is for this reason that the surviving sources view Justina unfavourably. The operative word here is surviving. Almost certainly other sources of the period presented Justina as a heroine in her own right, or documented the phases of collaboration between the empress and the bishop, rather than focusing on what seems to have been a short-lived conflict. But Ambrose's first biographer wanted to paint his hero as courageous in defying the imperial family, and so he depicted Justina, wrongly, as a committed heretic and the bishop's sworn enemy. Afterwards, medieval librarians, who had an unfortunate tendency to purge their libraries of works believed to encourage unorthodox views, took care to eliminate any positive accounts of the empress. So Justina passed into history as a holy bishop's nemesis. Reading between the lines of the surviving sources, we can see that the central conflict between Ambrose and Justina turned on whether the Christian Church should fall under the authority of the Roman state. At precisely the same time, in the Eastern Roman Empire, the groundwork was being laid for a very different theology, one that encouraged both church and state to obey the authority of an emperor chosen by God. But Ambrose championed the idea that the church should challenge earthly authority in God's name. To the extent that there was genuine conflict between Ambrose and Justina, this was its source. Like many 4th century Christians, Justina believed that the emperor was responsible for the flourishing of the church, and that the church in turn should obey the emperor. She would not have been surprised to learn that it was the Eastern Empire, placing its trust in a divinely appointed ruler, that flourished for a millennium after her death, even as the Western Empire spun into a chaos from which it would never recover. Justina was one of a dying breed, among the last daughters of the house of Constantine. Constantine the Great, the dynasty's namesake, was the scion of a military family from the Balkans, warriors who rode beneath the standards of the invincible sun. But in the autumn of 312, so the story goes, a voice from heaven spoke to him, directing him to place his armies under the protection of an obscure Eastern divinity, the Christ. The next day, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, he destroyed his rival Maxentius and captured Rome. The God of the Christians had delivered a decisive victory. While the city was no longer the imperial residence, it was still the empire's greatest prize. After his victory at the Milvian Bridge, Constantine began to shower the Christian churches with favours, and Christianity began a new chapter as an imperial faith. The women of Constantine's family were already known for their fierce character. Now they became famous for their outstanding piety. Constantine's mother, the Empress Helena, travelled to the Holy Land and returned with an incomparable treasure, wood from the very cross on which Jesus had been crucified. His daughter, Constantina, proved both a political power broker and a patron of the church. The newly powerful Christian bishops were a mixed blessing for the imperial women. With their appreciation of female piety, the bishops were often valuable allies, but in their sermons they sometimes railed against women as sirens who would lure even the chastest of men away from God. Inflammatory rhetoric was always popular, and few bishops could resist the temptation to play to the crowd.